So hello and welcome to our Zoom education session today on advanced care planning. My name is Sarah Cook and I'm a public education coordinator at the Alzheimer's Society of Peterborough, Kawartha Lakes, Northumberland, and Haliburton. And today we're really pleased to say that Anne-Marie Peters has joined us from the Alzheimer's Society as well in her role as the social worker for our First Link program. And she's going to be talking with us today about advanced care planning. So I'm going to turn it over to Anne.
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks for joining me today. So I'm going to be presenting the slideshow that has been designed by the Alzheimer's Society. And what we're going to be talking about today is advanced care planning in relation to healthcare. So I won't be addressing financial advanced care planning, although my hope is to have some time later if people have questions and you want to ask some questions about that. My background in this is that I used to be a capacity assessor for the Attorney General oh my goodness, I'm having a blank here. The public guardian and trustee. So I've had training in this, and I used to do capacity assessments. I no longer do them because they're very difficult, and it's a difficult job. However, I do have some knowledge and awareness around these issues, and they're quite challenging. So, and I used to do advanced care planning presentations at the hospital for patients who were newly diagnosed with terminal illnesses. So I've got a bit of experience around this, and I can answer some questions. And if I'm not able to, I can certainly go get information to follow up with. Okay, so what is advanced care planning? In a nutshell, it is not a will. It is what happens and what you plan for while you are still here. People have the misconception that once they do their wills and set up a living will and make decisions and then put their will in the filing cabinet or with their lawyer, that they're good, they don't have to make any other decisions, but that is not what advanced care planning is. Advanced care planning is the decisions that you make based on your values, your wishes, and your hopes of how you want to be cared for while you are still here, when you are no longer able to communicate those wishes. And those decisions are voluntary. Those wishes are voluntary. You get to decide when you're capable of what you want. So this is why it's advanced. I'm going to think about and decide what I would like to have happen in case I'm not able to communicate that to the people that need to know. So that's essentially what advanced care planning is. So why it is so important is the hope is that it can alleviate stress for yourself and others who are caring for you, because you have communicated how you want to be cared for when you are not able, like I said before, to communicate this. And essentially, some of these decisions, I mean, you can't really begin to imagine what they may be because we don't really know what we may be in for down the road, but it can provide a framework for these choices. And it can really help others to deal with the situation when you can't, again, really give them a sense of what you would want anymore. So for example, when I think of my father, when he has said to me something to the effect of, I don't want any major procedures or extraordinary measures to save me if my heart stops, if I stop breathing, then that gives me a sense that he does not want to be put in a coma or to be resuscitated if he stops breathing. So it gives a framework, because what he doesn't want is to have all these extra treatments to be kept alive when his body has said, I'm done. Okay? So, so how the healthcare process around consent for treatment works is that the healthcare providers are supposed to get consent from you to deliver treatment. So this is when you go into a doctor's office or the emerge and they ask, can we do this procedure? You can either say yes or no. So we've heard the stories of the patient left the hospital and refused treatment. Okay. Now, however, if you are in crisis, you're unconscious, or you're in a delirium, they do not need consent to treat. However, in an emergency, if the healthcare professional knows your wishes, they have to follow the wishes. So this is when things happen like if you have a DNR, which is a do not resuscitate, if they know that you don't want certain procedures, if you have special religious protocols, this is when they have to, but they have to know about the wishes. And here's the dilemma that we face. As I have experienced as a worker in the healthcare field for the past almost 17 years, I can tell you that not all healthcare professionals know what your wishes are. And even if you have a DNR, sometimes they don't realize you have a DNR and people do get resuscitated. So, when you are capable, okay, and we're going to get into what capable means in a few slides, you get to decide what you will or will not do as far as treatment. And you can express what you want for this, okay? But just because you make an advanced care plan, say you sit down with your family and you say, okay, this is what I want, and this is how I want things to be done. Say in a year, you change your mind, you say, I don't want that anymore. Just because you said it the year before doesn't mean it's written in stone and it's not consent. You get to change your mind because as we know, medical technology and science is advancing all the time. You can adjust and change your advanced care plan at any point, okay? Or you can decide, no, I've changed my mind, I want the treatment. So oftentimes, and this is something, and of course, if I could find this article, I would find it and post it. A lot of times when we make decisions sort of in theory, you know, we're in hypotheticals, we're going, you know what, if I ever got this disease, I wouldn't want the treatment because I don't want to go through all that. In the moment when we're not experiencing the actual disease, it's a little easier to make those decisions. But then when we're actually having that experience, we have a very different decision-making process because we're in the moment and we change our mind. And that is okay. It is not a problem for you to decide, you know what, I've changed my mind, I want the treatment. The same example, another example I can give actually, is oftentimes, and this has been, I've talked to EMR, not EMR, people who go to calls in the home, and the person has a do not resuscitate order, but the caregiver is like, I want you to resuscitate them, but they have a DNR. And what they don't realize is that in the moment when someone is actually stopped breathing, we panic and we want them to be resuscitated because we have a hard time witnessing these moments and we just struggle with that. In the moment, in the reality of these things, it's harder than when we have to talk about it and it's not happening. So this is where in advanced care plans, we get to say, you know what, I've changed my mind actually. I want to resuscitate it, or I want this, or I want that. Um, and it's you that decides that. Okay, so I can say, you know what, if I get cancer, I don't want this. But then if I do get cancer and I say, actually, I'm going to try that treatment, I get to change. Does that make sense for everyone? I hope it does. Um, so here's where we get into when people aren't capable. If you're not capable, then a substitute decision maker becomes the decision maker. Um, now, here's the trick, and this is where it gets a little murky. They can only follow your wishes and consent to treatments that are in the advanced care plan, but they have to know the plan, in which you have to have made a plan to communicate the plan. So this is why it's so important to just think about doing one and to communicate doing one. And then later on, we'll talk about actually picking people to do that, which I think my sense is that that people attending this today have already got people in mind. So they can only follow the known wishes. They cannot go rogue and decide what they think you want. They have to follow your wishes. They cannot do their own. And I have a really sad story where someone went against the person's wishes and brought them back. And the person was deeply, deeply angry about it because that's not what she wanted. And it resulted in, and still continues to result in, a life of constant, constant medical treatments and just a very difficult existence because she requires so much care. And she did not want, she really wanted to die. And the friend couldn't do it. She just couldn't do it. She couldn't stomach it, but that's what the person wanted. So my advice is pick someone who is willing to follow your wishes, regardless of how difficult they are. And again, this is really difficult to monitor because we don't have a legislative body or that monitors what your wishes are to make sure that your substitute decision maker is following your known wishes. So, sometimes it may not be caught. So this is why it's so important, and we'll talk later about getting someone you trust who's actually going to follow it. So in an ideal world, this is what's supposed to happen. You would receive what your treatment should be, the benefits of the treatment, the risks of the treatment, the side effects, an alternate course of action, and the consequences of not having the treatment. And some of you may have wonderful practitioners and specialists who go through this and explain this to you, or explain this to someone who needs to make the decision for you. But this may not be everyone's experience, and some of us know this. And some of us may be too scared to kind of ask the questions of our practitioners to go, I need more information. I want to know more information. But this is what we're supposed to know before we make decisions about treatment. Now, who can advance care plan? So the likelihood of me walking into a high school and sitting with a bunch of 16-year-olds to do this is pretty slim. Although in my household, we do have this conversation, which is pretty weird. But anyone over 16 years old who's mentally capable can start to express wishes. And this is important to do. I think that this is going to be something that needs to start to happen. We really need to become aware and start to think about this. If you poll people about if they have an advanced care plan, you would be shocked at how few people do. It usually doesn't happen until someone starts to have a medical condition where they seriously have to think about it. Um, and you would be surprised at how little people have communicated to their family doctor or a specialist of what they would wish for when they're dealing with an illness. It's it's a little scary. So now we get to the good stuff. So what does mental capacity mean? So there's a little bit of confusion around this. Um, so when I used to get requested for capacity assessments, it's a different thing. Does the person understand and appreciate the decisions that they are making around their health? Now for some of you who have had to make decisions around long-term care, um, for their person or their family member or their friend, the LIN does a capacity assessment for just the one component of healthcare, which is living arrangements. Where does the person live? Because there's 6 components, but the LIN just does the assessment for the one. And the other components are healthcare, nutrition, shelter, clothing, hygiene, and safety. But the LIN just looks at where they're going to live. But what mental capacity, so they just look at, does the person understand and appreciate what it means to live independently and what it means to go to long-term care? So they ask some really logical and rational questions. It's not a cognitive test. So there's this mix-up of, well, they did really poorly on their cognitive testing, so they're not capable. And that's not how it's measured. So, and this is how it works. We're all allowed to make bad decisions. If we understand and appreciate the bad decision we're making, we're still allowed to make the bad decision, right? So I'll give a really funny example. My son is working and earning his own money, and he decided to buy a used guitar. Now, I didn't want him to. I wanted him to save his money, but he understood that he was spending $800 on a used guitar that he couldn't make sure was a good guitar. And he understood that he'd be out $800, and then if it didn't work, that he couldn't get it back. And we did this whole conversation, and do you understand and do you appreciate that you'll be out all this money, and that if it goes bad, you have no way of giving it back? And so this is the conversation. He goes, yep, I accept responsibility, and if it's a dud, it's a dud, and I just have to live with it. So he presented with capacity to understand that he was about to take a risk. So when someone isn't capable, this is what it sounds like. So I had a client who would say, and so one of the questions is, okay, so if there's a fire in your apartment, what would you do? Oh, I would leave. Okay, so tell me more about that. How would you leave? Well, I would just go. Okay, well, tell me the path you would take to go. Well, I would just go. Okay, can you be more specific? Well, if there's a fire, I would just go. So, and some of you may have heard that. They can't get specific. They can't tell me. So what they've missed is, I can't tell you I would call 911. So they live in an apartment. They don't recognize that there's other people that live there. They don't understand that they'd have to go through a door. They don't, they can't explain how they would get out and where they would go. Well, I would just leave. And so as I keep asking questions, they keep giving me the same answer. Now, to a regular person, that would seem like, well, they would just go. But what's scary is that, what does that mean? they can't explain what that means. I need them to understand what that means and appreciate what that means. And they don't understand what that means. And in that moment, there's no fire when they're talking to me and they're calm. What would happen if they were actually panicked and scared? So this is where we have to kind of assess capacity. Now, I used to do it more just for financial, and we would have much stronger tests around how to see if they understand and appreciate their finances. But when it comes to mental capacity, so there was a gentleman that didn't shower for a year. And so he came in and it was clear it was a very safety issue as well as a hygiene issue. And his house had to be torn down and it was very, very unsafe. And he very much lacked capacity. But he had no awareness, as the police were going in with hazmat suits and there was black mold and his food in his fridge was pure liquid, and he absolutely did not understand or appreciate that he was living in a death trap and had no understanding or appreciation that this was not a safe situation. So these are the kind of things that we look at to measure mental capacity. So I hope that's clear. Now, the thing about mental capacity is that it can fluctuate with health, okay? So if you're in a delirium, you can go into a delirium, it can clear, and you can return. You could have a medical crisis where you could go and have a stroke, but then you can return to baseline and your capacity returns. Where it becomes a problem is when it's more of a progressive disease, like a dementia, and your mental capacity declines, but it doesn't return. So this is where we have to, and as soon as your mental capacity returns, you get to make your health decisions again. But if it doesn't return, then you get to stop. So who assesses? It's usually the health practitioner, which is, they do a quick just assessment, asking questions. Because again, it can fluctuate, and most times it can. You have good days, you have bad days, and you guys understand this very well. So again, this is the important piece, and I've touched on this already. You pick someone you trust, and this is your substitute decision maker. You make sure that person is comfortable and feels confident to act on your wishes, because you don't want someone who's just going to do what they want for you and take that over on you when you don't have the capacity to advocate for yourself. So you are the one that appoints your substitute decision maker. It's done in writing. You can have your power of attorney for personal care, and I suspect that most of you do, if not all of you do, who are online here. And the only time this person makes decisions for you is if you are not mentally capable. And that is what I was talking about before. If you happen to be in a medical crisis, that is the only time that they will act on your behalf. But when you get better and you're fine, they stop acting as your substitute decision maker. So it's only when you're in a medical crisis. Now, eventually, if it's a dementia, and some of you know this, you do eventually take over permanently. But say, for example, you're unconscious or you're in a delirium, they would only in that moment take that. But you get your ability to advocate for yourself back when you return to health. So this is your choice who does this. They do not advance care plan for you. Now, Ontario law makes sure there's always a substitute decision maker for you, which is why it's so important that you do this for yourself. I strongly advise that you find someone that will do this for you, and that you make it clear who it is and what you want, because you don't want someone unsuspecting or isn't prepared to do it for you, because it's a big job. So this is the list, the hierarchy. So in some instances, people are assigned a guardian. Um, so there's an attorney named, if you've named an attorney, a representative um, appointed by the Consent and Capacity Board, which most people, this is a very special case. But then when you look from 4 down, it starts with spouse, child, parent. So again, for most typical situations, it starts with spouse, then children, then your brother, sister, and any other relative. The last possible option that is only your last option is the public guardian or trustee. They don't want this unless they absolutely have to do it. So really, ideally, you want to name someone for yourself as best as you can. If you don't, it will go to a spouse or partner. If you have children, it will go to your children. If it doesn't, it'll go to a parent who's still alive. If you still have parents alive, it'll go to your siblings, and then it'll go to niece, nephews, and other relatives. So this is a weird one. So what'll happen is, say you have 5 children. All 5 children have to agree. So I've had a bit of nightmarish issues where I've had to locate all the siblings and find out all the brothers and sisters, and not all of them agreed, which made the situation very, very difficult. So what you really want is to pick someone who is going to follow your wishes. Because if you have children who don't agree, who fight or have issues, it just gets really, really ugly. But know that if you haven't picked one, and this is, of course, for people who haven't picked one, there's always going to be someone who's going to step in and do it, whether they know it or not. So this is where the person, now the person can decide they don't want to do it, and there have been cases like that. And they have to be 16 years old. And there's some, like, if they're prohibited by court, you want people willing to do this. The only time that people, this is something I learned the hard way, the only person that can't do it, say you really like your paid PSW who comes in and takes care of you, they can't be your substitute decision maker. Because I had a really messy situation, and this person would have loved to have been the power of attorney for health, and they're legally not allowed to do that because it's a conflict of interest. But the person needs to be 16, mentally capable, and have no conflicts. And if there are conflicts, then they are exempt. So that is definitely a conflict. But if there's other issues, is prohibited by the court, isn't available, doesn't want to, because sometimes it happens, right? Not all families are happy. So this is tricky to monitor and to make sure it works, because again, we don't have an ideal way of making sure everybody's wishes are being followed, which is why it's so key to find someone you trust. And of course, you hear me saying this over and over again. It's a bit annoying. But I've seen enough situations to tell you that if you have someone you trust and you feel comfortable, first of all, you're going to communicate more openly and you're going to be honest. And the person is going to do what you need them to do. Um, because their job is literally to follow your wishes and act in your best interest. It is not about them. And I have unfortunately seen enough situations where I've had to remind people that it's not about them, it's about the person. Um, and is what they're doing or what they're thinking really about the best interests of the client? And it's a difficult thing because it's legally this is what they're supposed to be doing. This is a big job. I would almost be tempted to suggest that we need to provide education around what it means to be a power of attorney or a substitute decision maker, because when you read through the description of what it means, it's a big job. And so it really does, you know, it really does behoove us to think about maybe part of what we could do to make it a bit of an easier job is to let people know what our wishes are. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. So how we could do that could be verbal. We could write it down. Um, and you could literally take a sheet of paper and write it down. It does not have to be in a legal document. You could video record, you could audio record. It really doesn't matter. The point is you could do it bulletproof. You could get on the computer and just do bullet form of what you want. As long as you communicate based on your values, your beliefs, and your wishes, what you want. And it doesn't have to be, I do not want this particular drug administered when I go for this particular procedure. It's not the nitty gritty medical stuff that I'm talking about. It's how do you want to be treated? You know, who do you want to be around you? Where do you want to be cared for? What are you willing to have happen if you're not able to live in your home? What kinds of things are important for you um, to have with you? um, how do you want your quality of life? Because that's really what you want. um, what's your quality of life? And it's it's those things. I'll give an example. It was a really powerful moment for me. I used to be the bereavement coordinator at hospice, and I used to run a group, the day hospice, with women who were living with terminal cancer, and we would once a week meet, have a support group, and then we would go and have lunch afterwards. Well, a woman joined our group, and she had esophageal cancer, which meant she couldn't eat. And she, so of course, I, I, I said, is there anything we can give you? And she goes, well, some water. So here we are enjoying this home cooked meal, which was to die for. It was literally. Um, and and I sat there and I was acutely aware of the fact that she couldn't eat. And it absolutely was heartbreaking for me. And so I kept saying, I really feel, I'm sorry. Like, I did not think about this. She goes, oh, it's okay. It's okay. I used to come to this group. I know this happened. And I said, how can we, acknowledge this and do this differently to be sensitive to you? And she said, well, next time I won't stay for lunch. So I said, fair enough, because, how horrible. So it really made me think about it a lot. And we all acknowledged it. And, she felt validated. So then I went and I thought, oh my goodness, what would I do if I couldn't eat? And so we had a really great discussion about what that would mean if we couldn't eat. Now, I'm Italian and food is love. Like I gotta tell you, I love my food. And we eat 3 times a day at least. So can you imagine if you have a cancer that does not allow you to eat, to taste food, to like so it really impacted me, and I thought about this. And so then there was my decision. I do not want a food, I don't want a feeding tube. If I can't eat, I'm not. No, I don't want this. Because, I know the research, I know I've seen what it does because I've worked, in palliative care, but I just to sit with her, to witness her journey and to know what happened, I just felt okay. And then I just thought, wow, the guilt I felt as I was tasting this wonderful meal and knowing that she couldn't share in that, I thought, okay, no, this would be hard for me. So again, quality of life. If I can't eat, I would so struggle because that would be a grief, that would be a loss, that would be something that I would just so miss. So these are the kinds of things you want to think about. Now that's for me, right? Like that's not for everybody. That's just a me thing because I promise you, I love my food, but that's not for everybody. Someone may say, no, I don't have a problem with that. Bring it on. And she didn't have a problem with that. And she got a tube and that was fine. But these are the kinds of things you want to think about. You want to think about who do you want, where, how, why, and what would be meaningful for you when you are at that point in your life. And this is what advanced care plans. Okay. So as I said, there's no special form. Uh, so a living will, although these things are changing, and I have to do more reading on that, they're not written in stone. Although what I find is that there are specific questions that are asked when you do your will with the lawyer that you can update about what specific things that you may not want. Like, do you want to be resuscitated? There's a new phrase for that, and I haven't, do not resuscitate. There's a new phrasing for that now. And you do not need a lawyer. So again, it's your choice. You get to do it yourself. It is your right to express your wishes and expect your wishes to be followed. But my hope is that give this some thought and that you really do this for yourself and for the people who are going to take care of you, because then it becomes a really more harmonious process. I mean, not that the end of, and not that the potential of having the end of life is always pleasant, but that what happens is that your wishes are respected and that you can recognize that people are doing what you want and you're not worrying about and panicking about things happening to you that you may not want. This is just you're beginning to advocate for yourself, and you're surrounding yourself and connecting with people who are going to follow through and support you, and that's really, really important. Okay, so that's it for the slides. Okay, good. We've got a little bit of time. There we go.
Perfect, Anne. Thank you. If you just stop sharing your screen.
Okay, and I do that stop share.
Yeah.
Look at that red button. Honest to goodness, like
That's perfect.
crazy fun.
So if anybody has any questions for Anne, you can just unmute yourself and Ask away.
I have a question.
Hi, Diane.
Hi. My husband is in a nursing home right
Okay.
now. He has dementia. And we've done the power of attorneys and we've done the wills and we've got the executors all, lined up and they've been given their copies and everything. I believe before Brian went in, he's been in 3.5 years now. I believe when he went in, I did complete that form because I had to let them know what his wishes were. And it was quite lengthy.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen it for 3.5 years, but I'm sure that's what it was.
Yeah.
I distinctly remember them asking me what his wishes were for end of life. And his wishes were do not resuscitate.
Right.
And because he said that very clearly one time when he was at the hospital, when he
Right.
was with it, and it was put on the file. So I believe I have that form, but at the nursing home. Is that something that I should check out?
So I would just ask for peace of mind, because depending, this is what can happen, is that if someone doesn't read the file, then they may miss it. Now, I know they go through great lengths at intake when you first go in to really be
Yes.
very, very thorough, which is
Yes.
good. The key is that they have to review the file. So the hope is that information is front and center and they keep up to date with that information. So if the next time the doctor comes in, do you get to talk to the doctor when he's seen by the doctor?
Not always. Well, I mean, I haven't been in there now since March 6th because of
Yes.
the outbreak.
Right.
Doctor called me the other day because I had concerns about my husband, but I did not talk about this.
Right.
I was more or less talking to him about Brian's health.
Right. Okay.
So, I mean, I don't know when I'll talk to him again.
Right. So I would just, if you've done your due diligence for sure, because I know that they're good about in the beginning making sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. I would just, if you think that they might forget, having said that, it might be fine. So if you just happen to have like an annual, just like, let's just kind of, are we good with everything? You're aware that these are his wishes, great.
Mm-hmm.
Just for peace of mind, because mistakes happen. And this is the dilemma when people, you'd be surprised at how many times I've said, did you read the file? And it's just as simple of, where is that document? It should be front and center. When you open that file, it should be right there.
Exactly.
on the thing. And it's been on the fridge. It's been like, the EMS have been great, right? They know, they look in the freezer, they look on the fridge, they know where to look for it and ask for it. But sometimes staff get busy, they get inundated. It's a new staff, it's overnight staff that don't work there, don't know the patient. And I'm not saying this to be alarmist, I'm saying this to be realistic. And so sometimes it's just helpful for us to just kind of go, hey, so I was just wondering, just a quick review, doc, do we have that DNR posted so that people know that if he stops breathing or his heart stops, we're not breaking ribs,
Yes.
we're not doing anything overly, because he wants a peaceful,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know.
But you would think that, just say for example, at the end of life, they would pull the file and pull that document out.
Well,
you know, and look,
well, you're speaking to someone who, yes, I know, I'm being kind. It's just that we continue to have to advocate until we don't.
I
And
know.
that's the hard work that you guys have to do, which is why we at the Alzheimer's Society try to help out and support that, because there's times that we can say, why don't we give a quick call, or why don't we help out a little bit, because I'm quite comfortable walking into or calling going, hi, I'm that annoying social worker who just wants to check and make sure that we're on task about this, because we just we don't want anything unnecessary to happen, right? Because really, enough is enough, right?
Yeah.
So that's so important. Having said that, they might be on the job, so hopefully they are.
Well, they were with my dad when my dad was in there.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So I mean, that was his wishes, and they did it.
Oh, that's great.
Oh. So okay, well that's good. But I will do that the next time I talk to the doctor.
Yeah, and this is a very trying time, because I think we're all just like, all the frontline workers aren't necessarily, as focused, and there's just a lot going on. So sometimes we just have to bring it back to just checking, and that can't hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
Thanks, Diane. Great response to Anne-Marie. Thank you for those suggestions and insights. Does anyone else have any other questions today or comments for Anne-Marie? Okay, well, we will be sure to post this session, and so that if you do recognize that somebody that you know may benefit from this education, please let them know that it will be posted on our website as well as our YouTube channel. I just want to thank Anne-Marie so much for your information today. It was so helpful. Advanced care planning is one of those topics, I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding around it, and I really liked how you took us through it step by step to help increase that understanding. So thank you for that. Again, for anyone that has questions about advanced care planning, we do have resources that we can share with you. It's just a matter of getting in touch with your client support coordinator. You can email Shelby or myself or Anne-Marie. We're happy to get back to you with what we hope will be some helpful information. So. Okay, well, just to let you know too that we'll have another education session next week, and we're going to talk about brain health. So we're going to talk about healthy brain foods. So what are some of the things that we want to consider when we're making selections about what we put into our bodies and how that impacts on our brain health. And we're also going to talk about the importance of challenging your brain. So we hope you'll consider joining us again next Tuesday. And don't forget our programs that are offered every day from 10 to 11. And then we also have our Alzheimer happy hour from 2 till 3 every day in the afternoon. So we hope you'll join us for those as well. Okay, well, wishing all of you a wonderful day. I know it's going to be a hot one, so try to stay cool, stay hydrated. And thanks again, Anne-Marie, for a great presentation.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.